as the entire world, or the entire universe by now has heard, Osama bin Laden is dead, and his body has been captured by U.S. forces. Now, this happened early yesterday, but the official statement by Barack Obama didn't happen until about 11:15 p.m. Now, bin Laden was found in Islamabad in a mansion just outside the city, where, frankly, a lot of people did not think that he was going to be found. Now, Special Operations said that they had gone in with the help of the Pakistani government and went in with where bin Laden was hiding, and there was a firefight, and as a result, bin Laden died. And the U.S. has said quite emphatically, and has repeated over and over and over again, that this is in fact bin Laden, and he is in fact dead, and his body is in custody of U.S. forces. Now, in my response to this event, first I'm going to talk about the actual implications of this happening, and then in the second part, I'm actually going to deal with Obama's speech that he gave with the capture and the killing of bin Laden. First of all, this is obviously going to raise the terror alert level, which we haven't seen in about 8 years. But I mean, obviously, this is a major world event, almost as big as the actual 9/11 events itself. Now, the places in the world where this will obviously have the most impact is obviously Afghanistan and Pakistan itself. Now, the Pakistani government is not liked by, well, pretty much anybody in Pakistan right now. And now with this Pakistani help catching and killing bin Laden, the tribal areas where Islamic fundamentalism has the most grip is obviously going to be the most upset by this, and will no doubt step up their attacks against the Pakistani government and any kind of secular forces or progressive organizations and stuff like that. So I think the main brunt of this won't even actually be Afghanistan. It will probably be Pakistan, retaliations against the Pakistani government for their hand in this operation. Now, that is not to say that these similar things will not occur in Afghanistan itself. Obviously, US-based and NATO bases are being put on a higher alert as a result of this. But I think the true brunt, the retaliation of this, will occur in Pakistan as opposed to Afghanistan. There is a very humorous element to this whole situation. For all the screaming and crying that Republicans do, Republican supporters say, and the T-tards, screaming how the Democrats are soft on terror, and Barack Obama is a terrorist and all this, and they're not really energized to defeat terrorism. This is something that the Democrats are going to be able to throw in Republican faces until the end of time. Oh, Democrats are soft on terrorism. Well, a Democratic president caught and killed Osama bin Laden. Going back to my previous video where I was talking about how I thought it was a very close race between Barack Obama and who I say is going to be the candidate, Sarah Palin, and that they're probably putting Sarah Palin up because she's such a ridiculous extremist that people are going to vote for Obama just to stay away from Sarah Palin. Or maybe now, because of so much anger towards Barack Obama, they're putting up the extremist Palin so that people will go to her as a rejection out of the anger towards Obama, because with enough people against Obama, the extremist is going to win. Well, now that bin Laden is dead, I am absolutely certain that Barack Obama is going to win the 2012 election. I mean, he's going to be riding this accomplishment forever. I mean, if it was close, and I felt that it's close between a Democrat and Republican, now with bin Laden having been captured under a Democratic, and more specifically Barack Obama as president, Democrats are going to win. That night, when they were showing all the people that were screaming and celebrating outside the White House, chanting USA, USA, bin Laden dead, and all that stuff, and the waving of American flags and the chanting and screaming, I was thinking to myself, you know, people, nothing's changed. Maybe somehow in their mind they're going to think now that the invasion of Afghanistan was somehow now justified. That now the 1.5 million people who've been killed by US and NATO forces inside Afghanistan will have all been worth it. Well, it isn't, and it wasn't. The wars of occupation in Iraq and Afghanistan, all based on the pretext, the lie of terrorism, are going to continue. They're not going to stop at all. It's not going away. And those people are going to have to realize sooner or later that catching bin Laden was never the point to begin with. What I think is very appropriate is how bin Laden was killed, not captured. If you even go and look at the FBI website, they'll say bin Laden is wanted in questioning for the 9/11 attacks, not wanted on suspicion of the 9/11 attacks. Because even the FBI itself has publicly acknowledged that it doesn't actually have any evidence against Osama bin Laden. And now that he's dead, he can't go on trial. Because if he goes on trial, there are going to be all questions about where did he get the money from? Where did he get the plan and the organization from? Oh, by the way, how did you take a couple of people who didn't know how to fly a plane to fly in the world's most sophisticated civilian aircraft? There's a lot of questions that aren't going to be asked now because he's dead. He hasn't been on trial, which the United States, more specifically the U.S. government, has always claimed was the point, was to put him on trial. So, when Barack Obama said justice has been done, no, it wasn't. He was just killed. And he can't be interrogated or questioned or put on trial so we can find out the sources of his money and all this other stuff. Stuff that would have been more important than actually catching the man himself. Now, I'm going to move on to Barack Obama's actual speech on the situation. Obama said, now finally a man who has killed thousands has been brought to justice. Now, I find that funny. Now, when are people like you, George Bush, Dick Cheney, going to be brought to justice for the killing of millions in the name of finding and fighting this man? But that's not going to happen, because we know might makes right, and those on the side of the largest might don't stand trial for their crimes. During his speech, Barack Obama said, we want to reiterate to the world, we want to let the world know and remind them that this is not a war against Islam. This is not a war against the Muslim religion. And at least in that, he's telling the truth. This is not a war against Islam. This is a war against the poor and working class of the third world. The third world and at home, but primarily, overwhelmingly, against the poor and working classes of the third world. Their countries were invaded to get a hold of their resources, to gain control of their nations, control of their pool of labor, their means of production, for geopolitical strategic positioning. No, it's not a war on Islam. It's a war for profit. And religion is a nice little pretext that they can put over it to distract from the real reason. No, this is not a war against Islam. It's a war against the poor and working class of the third world. In another moment of honesty, a minute or so later, Barack Obama said, this is not a war the American people chose. Well, that's true. That's very true. The American people did not choose this war. It was the financial and political elite of the West who chose this war. Most specifically the U.S. They chose the war on terror to happen. Terrorism existed long before 9/11. And these repeated invasions and occupations of countries which had nothing to do with it were not something the American people chose. The war in Iraq went directly against public opinion. The majority of the people were not behind this. There were a few deluded some who really believed all the lies about weapons of mass destruction and links to Al-Qaeda. But the majority did not. That war, the one against Libya, and maybe even the one against Afghanistan, certainly the one against Yemen, and the one against the unofficial one against Pakistan, were not done in the name of the American people. It was done largely, as much as possible, done without their knowledge. So no, the American people did not want this war. The elite inside America wanted this war. In even a third moment of honesty, Barack Obama said, the generation behind this struggle has been carrying the burden of this since 9/11. Now by that, I assume he means probably the young and the working class since 9/11. And by carrying the burden, I'm sure he didn't really mean those who sacrificed their lives for this war. I think he meant those who became poor or got poorer as a result of the economic cost of this war, the war on terror. Those who lost everything they had in the global economic crash to pay for this war. All those who had their jobs cut. The increased tax on the working and poor class, and the tax cuts to the rich to get them better off. So yeah, it has been the poor, the young, and the working class who have carried the burden for this war, financially and socially. During this speech, Obama said that the people behind this and the entire effort to do it was heroic. Heroic? That's a nice way of taking all the crimes that have been committed, undeclared wars, extrajudicial killings, illegal invasions, detentions, torture, Abu Ghraib, Guantanamo Bay, all of it was worth it. The torture and murder of 3 million people was worth it. This statement was intended to whitewash all of that as a victory and not a massive insult to mankind that it actually is. And that was probably one of the most disgusting things he said during the entire speech. Whitewashing the entire military history and its illegal detention, torture, forced rapes, and every other ugly thing that went into this war on terror has now all been justified and whitewashed by using the term heroic. In conclusion, despite the epic moment of bin Laden having been captured, and I'm sure to come there will be a lot of questions as to whether it's really him or not, we will not see a de-escalation of the wars made in the name of the pretext of terror. These wars will not stop. They will continue. And they will continue because these are not wars of ending terrorism or humanitarian grounds. These are wars completely for the profit of a few wealthy elite who make out in this society, gains access to those resources of the countries that have been destroyed, all off the backs of the suffering and cash payments of the working class. We'll have to pay for them. We're the ones who are going to have to go into the wars and die for them. We are the ones that are going to lose our livelihoods for them. This is the real face of U.S. imperialism. That's what these wars are about. And that goes right across every single country involved in this, both militarily and with support. These wars will not stop. The occupation of these countries will not come to an end because terrorism is not the reason for their existence. All of these wars are for access to markets, access to natural resources, and sources of cheap labor for the ruling economic aristocracy who actually control the nation, and not the masses of working and poor people who actually make up the nation. Have no illusions. These illegal wars, illegal arrests, detentions, political assassinations, torture, they're not done. They're going to continue.